Friday morning this time, not Saturday morning. We usually do this on Saturdays,
I
but
see.
this
Yeah.
time because we had to adjust our schedule for some big wigs. Or
No,
you're here.
enjoying the weekends is very important for happiness, Raj.
All right, good spin. You're saying the right things. Okay, so I want to start out by giving you a little bit of a background to how I know Viral. Viral and I both went to NYU to get a PhD, and he was in the finance department, and I was in the marketing department, and we were contemporaries, and so we used to hang out, and we had a couple of common interests: singing and cricket, and so we got to meet quite a bit, and he's an awesome singer. I hate to admit this, but even a better singer than I am. Okay, actually, no. I mean, there's no comparison at all. He's just really good. So we sang one or two duets too, right? We sang that. I know. I mean, the word duet seems like romantic, but in this case, it was just two men singing. Um,
Are you
Yeah, I
gonna
think we
sing
did
for
the
us,
sing
Mohammed?
from Padosan, I think, isn't it?
Padosan, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Chaturna.
that Chaturna. Yeah, I think that was the blockbuster hit. And I remember you sang the title song of the movie Dawn with the
That
lion
was with
mask
the mask
on
and
your
everything.
face.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, true. So Mel,
But by the way, the mask was the best part of the songs.
You're good. Good. The gloves are off. All right. Okay. um, so I guess I mean we could sing, Mel, but the thing is that I got to warn you that this is like Indian Bollywood songs, right? Without the accompaniments and without the dancing. I mean, just good voices won't carry it. I think you need all those
Yeah.
accompaniments for it to push.
Well,
push
we'll
it.
have to do a part 2 interview then, and we'll have some
Sure,
fun.
yeah, that's a possibility. But maybe it might happen at the end of this session too. By the way, guys, hey, Mohammed Ismail, how are you doing? And Mohammed Dohadwala, wow, Dudu's here. Yo, Don, he says. Okay, Dudu, very happy to see you as well. And whoever's there, please tell us, okay, that you're here. Send us a greeting. And also, when we kind of change things up a little bit, every time we ask you guys to tell us where you're from, but this time maybe tell us a little bit about what you're grateful for. I know this is a stressful time, but we have the solution right in front of us in the form of our chief guest, who's going to tell us what to do, at least with regard to the economy. And so things are going to get happier. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Pooja. Tell us what you're grateful for. I know it's somewhat stressful, but I do want to hear about things that you're grateful for. Elena has joined us as well, and as you know, she's going to be pushed up onto the screen in the latter half of the show. Okay, so let me start by telling you a little bit about the background. So Viral and I used to, play cricket and also sing in a group called Surbahar. After that, we graduated. I came to the University of Texas. He went to London Business School and then eventually came back to NYU, which is a great honor, by the way. Your alma mater usually doesn't hire you back unless you're a really big guy, and Viral is. And so NYU hired him back. And when I went to New York City in 2009, 10, maybe roundabouts, I bumped into him. And I said, hey, how are you doing? And, we said, okay, let's catch up. Okay, he was busy. And so I said, okay, let's meet tomorrow. Let's catch up. So I started the next day by asking him, how's everything going? How's research? And he began by saying, Raj, my research is in crisis. And I took a huge step back. I said, what? It's in crisis? But I thought you're a big star. Your research is in crisis. And he said, no, I study crisis. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah. No. I thought I was speaking the truth when I said my research is in crisis.
Oh my goodness. I was just like buckling over with laughter, because I'd misunderstood. And I thought, and what vulnerability, I thought to myself, here's a guy, authentic guy, right off the bat, the very first thing he tells me is that his research is going down the drain. Anyway, so it's awesome to have you here. And I know you're very busy and lots of things going on, lots of things on your plate. And so to spare the time to talk to us is really amazing. Thank you very much. And I want to start out with a first question, which I'm sure is on many, many people's minds here, which is because of the pandemic, it's clear that it's affecting the economy badly, right? And almost universally. We see that reflected in the stock market and stuff. And my first question to you is, how long can we expect this to last? Okay, and maybe it differs by country, maybe it differs by region. In general, okay, I know there are nuances to this, but I want you to tell us a little bit about what is your opinion about how long it's going to last?
Firstly, thanks, Raj, for inviting me, and thank you to all the participants wherever you are. I see that a large number of you are very happy and especially grateful for your wonderful families, and I think that's very nice to read. Thank you also, Mel, for joining. It's a delight to be here. Let me get back to the question that Raj posed, which is how long might this be? And I have to say that having lived through the global financial crisis in '07, '08, prior to that, the recession of 2001, 2002, after the dot com crash, I have never felt the fog of uncertainty about the outcomes that we feel right now. And I think there are three reasons for this, and it's good to break it up a little bit so we understand what is likely to get resolved sooner and what may not get resolved for some time. First and foremost, I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that ultimately this is about the pandemic. A lot of people have a tendency to start focusing on economic outcomes right away. What is the number of job losses, losses to companies, crash in the stock market, etc. And clearly, those are truly important indicators of what's happening to the economy. But ultimately, we have to understand the spread of the pandemic and how and why it is affecting human behavior the way it is. And on this first point, the main observation I want to convey is that until a vaccine is found and ready to be delivered in large numbers all over the world, the fog of uncertainty as to how long we might be in this phase is unlikely to get cleared up very soon. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think simply because we relax social distancing norms, people will revert back to life as normal until this uncertainty about second waves, etc., remain. Because it will be a constrained response. We will be concerned about a second wave of the virus. We will be concerned about going back to our original distancing norms relative to the social distancing norms that we have adopted. So this background risk or uncertainty, which I think is the most important change that has occurred in my view, is something to keep at the back of our minds when we think about when we will be able to emerge out of this. Okay, that's first point. Second point, clearly there is an immediate impact of the social distancing norms on economic well-being. And clearly for many of us who are relatively, I would say, beyond the subsistence levels, even though it impacts our lives, it does not impact it in a manner that it's a game changer, so to speak. However, I hesitate to focus on that. I think we have got to focus at the present time on the economic well-being and hardships of those who do not have the luxury of saying that they are above the subsistence level. And I think uh, how quickly will their lives return to normal, I think is going to partly depend on the scale and the effectiveness of the policy solutions that are being designed and engineered as we speak, even though we are already about 3 months into the pandemic already in many of the countries and in some others even longer. So I think that that also remains, unfortunately, a question mark, but I would say that I'm hopeful that the authorities will ultimately focus on where the humanitarian response needs to be the strongest and not focus so much on those who are affected. We are all affected, but the focus has to be on those who are really at or below the subsistence levels of sort of well-being. And third, I would say that and I say this with some hesitation, but I would like to say it, which is that there is some important lessons being drawn that the source of the pandemic may in fact be related to much longer term climate changes that we are experiencing. There's one view that these zoonotic diseases, zoonotic as in passed to human beings from animals, these zoonotic diseases such as SARS, MERS, coronavirus, that the reason why these are now happening at a higher frequency than we were used to is because fauna animals are moving and migrating from the poles, from the tropics, which are getting very warm, towards the poles which are now relatively warmer, but of course not as warm as the tropics are now. Now, as these animals are migrating, they are coming in contact with germs, bacteria, viruses that they don't have immunity for. And as a result of that, they are getting infected, and through a variety of complex chains, the zoonotic diseases are getting passed on to humanity. Now, broadly speaking, why am I saying all this? The reason why I'm saying all this is that what is apparent to me as an individual, and it is perhaps to many, is that while those below the subsistence levels are not the ones who are probably over consuming, I think there is a big part of the world that is not just over consuming, but is consuming in a manner that is not conducive to having the best climate conditions, best planetary conditions, best sustainability conditions for the quality of human life to remain. I think to me, the coronavirus is almost a sobering moment of that truth. It's a rude awakening of sorts that we have perhaps ignored, where we live on, the air that we breathe, the conditions that we are likely to leave behind for future generations. And I'm hoping that some of the backtracking of excessive consumption, not so climate friendly consumption that we are undertaking, perhaps will be revisited as a much longer term change in our habits down the road. So while I'm saying is that the fog of uncertainty is likely to remain, the immediate hardships will hopefully be addressed by the policy responses. I am indeed hoping that we adopt more climate friendly consumption policies down the line as almost a permanent change as a result of this sobering moment that we are all living in.
Wow, that's a much deeper response than I expected. But I suppose I should have expected it from you, Virat. Now, Mel dropped out, and I'm going to try and bring her back in just a moment. Here we go. I hope that she's able to share the screen with you. Yeah, I'm able to see you. Mel, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Okay, and we are able to hear you as well, which is great. Okay, so this is really juicy, Virat. Okay, so I'm really glad I started with that question because it's opened up a whole vista of new avenues to pursue. And by the way, guys, I don't need to remind you that please do type in your questions. We have Elena here who's going to keep track of those questions and bring them back in the second half. Now, Elena, I'm also noticing that some people say that Autumn says she can't hear anything. We are not having that problem, Autumn. I don't know why that's happening at your end. Maybe you need to kind of close down or your computer and then restart it, or just try and log in through another device. Okay, that might help. Okay, so let's get back to topic. You talked about these three kind of things, and one of those was the uncertainty about the vaccine. I think it's a great answer, and I do think that that's something that we forget. And it's not clear exactly when that vaccine is going to show up. Okay, now you focused on this idea that opening up the economy too soon, before the vaccine is found, might still leave us in a situation where there's this backdrop of uncertainty, right? So what would you suggest, though, in the meanwhile? I mean, especially if you consider the people who are below the subsistence levels, they clearly depend on, the trickle down, right? I mean, somebody's got to employ them, and for that, those people need to have a cash flow coming in and so on. So how do you resolve this dilemma then?
Let me again respond in 3 points. Maybe you'll realize I'm a person of threes rather than twos. But 3 things. First, I'm not at all suggesting that we don't need to relax the lockdown measures. I think the economists, the epidemiologists, the medical community differ a little bit on the stringency of what should be relaxed when, but they are all in agreement that the best thing would be if we could really do testing and tracing, so that when the numbers fall below a certain threshold level as the new cases per day, if new cases do rise again, we are able to find out whether it is really a community spread that is rife, or whether we can trace the cases to specific individuals, and whether the spread is contained to their households and maybe the immediate neighborhoods. Now, if you don't test and trace in this manner, the trouble is that you have to follow a binary response. Either you say the lockdown is very stringent, or you have to say, listen, we are opening up fully. There are some intermediate solutions that have also been proposed, which are relying on the fact that younger people, especially, and by young I always include like below 60, because I always want to be young for a very long time.
I thought you were below 50 even.
Yeah, below 50, but I'm looking forward to the next decade. But jokes apart, I think it's sort of, because this is such a serious issue, and I'm going to be talking about fatalities very soon, which is that the medical research shows that the fatalities tend to rise at a precipitously high rate as you go beyond a certain age. Now, of course, your overall health condition matters. But there is an age group where the fatality rate from even being infected by the virus is not that high. Now, given that clearly livelihoods are also important to sustain, and I want to stress, especially for those who are below the subsistence levels, another remedy that's been proposed is that you do a slightly targeted relaxation, which is you relax the social distancing norms for those who are not vulnerable to the fatality risk, and you continue with a stricter distancing measures for the elderly who are the more vulnerable at this point. So my sense is that there are targeted and clever ways of doing the relaxations, which are going to have, which are, and I think what I like about them is that they don't subject you to this difficult moral trade-off of lives versus livelihood. What they are saying is that perhaps if you do it in a clever way, you don't necessarily have to face that trade-off. That's my first point. The second point is, as far as providing support to those who are below subsistence levels. And I want to stress one point here is that not only are they below the subsistence levels in the sense of maybe not having adequate buffers, they may have to actually make the difficult choice and expose themselves to the risk of fatality because they have to look out for jobs. They may have to step out to the community kitchen to get a meal. And it's a constrained choice for these individuals. And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, the quality of healthcare is also poor precisely in the neighborhoods where many of these, let's call them our brothers and sisters are living. So I think ultimately the response has to be very direct. I think to the extent you can do a direct bank transfer to them in their accounts, in my opinion, this is the time to do it. Why? Because I don't know whether someone who's below the subsistence level has to pay a medical bill, whether has to pay a bill for keeping their children into the school, whether they need to pay their rents or mortgages or whatever these are. I think it's best not to make the aid targeted on a specific use. I think it should be targeted to those who are most affected, but it'll be best to just give them the transfer and let them decide where is their need the greatest. So that's my point too. And the third point I would raise here is that this is a global phenomenon. It's not at the level of one country. If you think about it at a city level or a state level, even within a country, this is about multiple states trying to open up together. Our well-being, while we don't realize it, is not connected even just to the people within the city, within the state, within the country. It is actually a truly globally interconnected world that we live in. I'll give a good analogy from Hurricane Sandy, which we experienced in New York 6-7 years back. And I realized I thought for the first time about how gasoline reaches Manhattan that time. And it comes from different parts of the world through ships and tankers to the shores of New Jersey. Then trucks are bringing it down to the pumping stations in Manhattan. And if any piece of this chain breaks down, you actually cannot get gasoline into your car, into your evacuation. You needed water to be taken out of premises that time. So you needed all these suction machines. You couldn't operate anything. And I think to me, this has been the other revelation as to how interdependent we are as humanity on each other in different parts of the world. And I think the opening up must factor in the fact that this is a global pandemic. This is likely to be a global correction, if not a global recession, and that countries should ideally coordinate, especially, again, just as I spoke about people who are below the subsistence level, we can think about countries where a large part of the population is below the subsistence levels. And I think we have to think about their well-being at the present moment, because if they can't grow well, I think we have to realize at the end of the day, none of us will be able to grow well and get out of the contraction we are currently witnessing.
It's awesome, Viral. I mean, I love these three, so I'm going to pose you a three question again, okay? And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to
I'll have to do 3 by 3 then.
Okay, so lots of people have said lots of things that they're grateful for, even in this pandemic. And I got to go back and look at those comments. And it's early in this, right? I asked this question right at the beginning. Grateful for relaxing restrictions here and now. This is from Heather in Israel. And she, Autumn is grateful for family, boyfriend, and car, in that order, I think. Okay, which is great. So my question to you is, what are you grateful for right now?
I would say
three things.
Three things, yeah. I think first and foremost, it has to be, I think, being able to be with your family and loved ones at the moment. I think, as you know, a large number of families have been separated. Many people have lost their family members either to the virus or the other comorbidities that might apply in different cases. So I think I would say that's probably the most important thing for most individuals, and I'm certainly grateful for that. I think second, I'm grateful for the fact that we are, though, at the same time in a moment where we can all actually individually make a difference. I think, to quote Mahatma Gandhi here, he said that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And very often I have found episodes such as the Sandy or the global financial crisis. I'm sure in the past it was the wars. Right now it's the pandemic. When you are forced to spend a lot of time with yourself, we all end up doing a little bit of self-discovery, thinking deep inside as to what it is, what am I supposed to be, what is my calling, what it is that I should devote my time to. And my sense is, this is a moment where we can all make a difference. We can make a difference to those who are working for us, those who we are working with, perhaps even helping the firms we are working for, because in a way, the scale of the problem is so large that we can all contribute in our own ways. And I think I go back to what I said earlier, that the big revelation is how interdependent we are. And I think I'm grateful for this revelation. I'm grateful for the fact that you realize that an entirely self-centered focus on economic well-being besides your mental well-being may not actually be the right answer to going about things. I think I'm very grateful for that revelation, and that in some ways this is a moment where some of us can actually make a difference to the lives of others. And third, I'm grateful for the fact that we are still at a time when we can all connect with each other in ways that we could not have earlier. Let's think about this session, right? You and I would not have been on a live session 25 years back, but we are. Many families that are separated from each other are nevertheless able to be connected with each other. I have a friend who is stuck in another country and was in quarantine for 3 weeks, and yet with his phone, he said, this is my best buddy, because he said, I'm able to connect with this to everyone. And so I'm grateful for the progress that we have made in technology. I'm grateful that it has revealed that I think digital, to me, is turning out to be a way through which we may be able to actually contain some of the carbon emissions and so on, that through which we are inflicting a lot of damage to the planet. And as I said, I'm getting convinced more and more. I think it's an interesting hypothesis that zoonotic diseases are linked to climate change, but it is appealing to me more and more as a hypothesis that there may be something to it. Why is it that in the last 2 decades, now this is the third or the fourth large outbreak of a zoonotic disease in the world? So I'm grateful that I'm offering this as a hope. as something positive that we can look forward to the future, that maybe we already have tools to actually contain this problem from repeating in future. And I think being digital, using these technologies in the most powerful ways, reorienting our work and lifestyles in a manner that balances not just our needs, but also the needs of the nature and the planet, for it to be sustainable in terms of quality of life for the youth, for our children, for the future generations. I think there's already a lot of hope in the progress we have made. I think it requires a little bit of orientation of perspective and what our objectives are.
Wow, good. Mel, over to you.
Thank you, Raj, and thank you to Raul. So during all of this, I've noticed a lot of blame going between countries, specifically the U.S. towards China. That has been happening, and this personally upsets me because the interdependence is so obvious to me. The connectedness of our well-being is so obvious to me. When you hurt, I hurt. Your hurt is my hurt. And I'm curious, in your discussions or participation in this global discussion, when you're talking with other leaders who are making decisions at that level, is there an awareness happening of that connectedness? Is there anyone at that level recognizing the oneness? Is there a global empathy unfolding in world leaders where they want to hold hands and lift each other up? Is it tipping that way, or are we is the world leadership very much no mine, no me? What energy are you seeing in at that level?
Okay, before you respond, Viral, first of all, Mel, great question, beautiful question. I love it. And I should just remind people here who have tuned in that Viral was the deputy governor for the Reserve Bank of India, which you can think of as the Fed for the US. It's the same corresponding agency. It sets interest rates, etc. And therefore, he's really qualified to answer this question at the high level. And I also love it because, when your back is to the wall, that's when a scarcity orientation often comes in, and you want to be protective and you want to take care of yourself and by extension, your neighborhood, your family, your country, and not really cooperate. That's not the instinct when you're pushed to the corner, right? And in many ways, we are pushed to the corner. And yet, the situation demands that we rise above ourselves and transcend this division and unite in order to beat this common enemy, so to speak, right? Which might actually be a friend at some level, right? So, beautiful question. I love it. Over to you, Viral.
Yeah, I fully endorse what Raj has said. I think, Mel, you've asked a very deep, perhaps maybe the most important question of our times in a way. I think the pandemics is exposing sort of very paradoxical truths. And I think one of the paradoxical truths is exactly what Raj described, which is that when you are facing a shortage economy, the human tendency is to want to blame someone else for it. I think maybe short-lived, but at least it seems that there is some happiness derived from such attribution of cause to someone else. And yet it's a paradox, because what the pandemic is really telling you is that, no, you are all heavily interdependent. I think that is what, to me, it has revealed in a big way. Now, I think to give a reasonable answer to your question, I will need to step back and try and explain why I think there is so much discontent about globalization and about why there is almost sort of at national level there is this push to actually break trade from other countries and be a little more isolationist rather than actually rely on doing things together. I think what has happened is globalization has produced massive benefits. I think it is reflected in the levels of trade that countries have been doing with each other over the last 3 decades, especially. We don't acknowledge it very explicitly, but even in countries where a lot of jobs are lost, actually, the kind of products items we consume, either for necessary expenditures or for luxury, they are at remarkably low levels of prices. And I think this low cost of production that the whole world has benefited from in its consumption is not adequately stressed in the political message that goes around globalization. Now, in spite of all these benefits, why is it that the common man on the ground, even in rich countries, is a bit disappointed with it all? I think it is because every time there is a big industrial revolution or a technological revolution, there is a displacement of jobs. And those who are displaced are not the immediate beneficiaries of this. They may have some indirect benefits, as I mentioned, through a low cost of items they are consuming. Maybe their children will be better off down the line, but we may or may not necessarily be able to see that with perfect foresight. So the discontent has arisen because, in my opinion, the national level policies, which should have actually made the right redistribution and transfers to ensure that there was a soft landing for those who are displaced as a result of these industrial technological revolution, hasn't taken place. Now, paradoxically, what has happened is this has led precisely to, in my opinion, to the rise of leadership that is simply saying what the discontent wants to hear, rather than what the real source of that discontent is, which is that the national policies, the welfare state, the redistributive policies have failed to make it a soft landing for those who were expected to be displaced as a result of globalization. So it's not that I don't think anyone thought that by companies outsourcing to different parts of the world where labor was cheap, or companies shifting manufacturing to countries where production capacities could be put in place at low costs, countries where medical costs were low and insurance costs were low, so it was better to hire labor there. I don't think any corporates could have said that, oh, we are doing this because we are not displacing jobs. They knew that. So we knew fully well ahead of time that there was going to be a displacement of jobs with this arbitrage of different kinds of relative cost structures in different parts of the economy.
So very quickly, Viral, just want to ask a clarification question here. People might have known this, but couldn't somebody argue that, this displacement is going to happen, but we are so confident in the innovative capacity of our citizens that they're going to come up with jobs internally that are going to absorb these displaced people? Couldn't that be argued as a reason why people didn't act?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that that could have been the hope. And, since we are talking about human behavior and nature quite a bit, one probably very common human bias is that even if you know something, you don't react to it until you experience it yourself. You don't kind of really, if you have not experienced something before, it's sort of a little bit of this, you have a visualization, and now different people are willing to believe in abstractions at different levels, and so it might seem like a theoretical concept, but until you've experienced it, you don't do something about it. But no, in the sense that what does it require to put this displaced employees back into jobs? It requires reskilling. It requires a different kind of vocational training. It requires a fundamental change in the education system, where brick and mortar jobs were available in all countries, but now they are not available in some countries. So you need to retool what the education system is for this to happen. And so I'm of the opinion that it required actually a public or a government response, not in terms of making the landing soft by simply giving freebies and cushioning them with some extra transfers of money. You can do that in the short run, like to deal with the pandemic hardship. But to improve your permanent income, you need to improve people's job prospects. You need to improve real wages. And for that, the displaced employees needed to be given better education, better reskilling opportunities, better vocational training opportunities. So just to give you an example, someone in my family once mentioned that there is actually more than 2 to 3 million jobs in biotech in the United States, but that we are simply not gearing our education system in the direction that we are producing those many graduates in this field over here. Now, this seems like a fascinating field to me. Imagine being able to give a device in the hand of someone who's not able to use his or her hand anymore, and them being able to use with this device and control things that they can't control anymore, being able to live their life as normally, there would clearly be tremendous demand for these kind of technologies. So I do think that what has failed is not globalization. What has failed is the response of the governments whose countries have seen large jobs being displaced. And now, paradoxically, we are seeing a rise of leadership that, rather than acknowledging and addressing this problem, is simply doing an encore over and over again of what the symptoms are, without actually saying what is the real problem and what, therefore, is the real solution that one needs to provide. My sense is that trying to kill our interdependence is sort of going back several decades, if not centuries, in terms of our existence. And I think, as the recent pandemic shows, like, just imagine, even the solution right now, would you want a vaccine that is developed just in one part of the world to remain localized to that part of the world?
No, not at all.
No. So I think it's very clear that even the solutions to what we are in right now are suggesting that we need to actually embrace a slightly more interdependent view of the world and of humanity, and figure out how do we choose right national policies that to deal with the displacement of jobs we encounter when we try to do the best through globalization, for trade, for costs of the items we consume, and for overall well-being.
By the way, I don't know if you think that you answered Mel's original question, which was, do you think that it's tipping one way or the other in terms of global leadership? I think that indirectly you've answered it saying that no, right? People are becoming more isolationist when they, in fact, but that was even before the pandemic, that people were becoming.
Yeah, absolutely. My sense is the pandemic is just, I think, revealing some of these issues in a much greater intensity. I would say the issue really came to the fore with the global financial crisis of 2007, 2008, when it became clear that household credit, pushing dreams of home ownership, giving cheap credit to households, etc., were being used as sort of palliative medicine, not to undertake sort of deeper remedies and solutions for the fact that there had been a deterioration in the quality of jobs in Western economies. There had been a decline in real incomes, income inequality, wage inequality, inequality in healthcare provision. All of these are statistics that are staggering at one level. During the pandemic, again, to use the pandemic, I saw one very intense image of a large number of people who were sleeping in a parking lot in Las Vegas, using the lane demarcation as sort of their social distancing norm. If someone had told me this is, if someone had not told me this was from Las Vegas, I would have thought this is from a developing economy. And so there are pockets in Western economies that are now no longer worthy of being descriptions of what one would like to think of as a Western industrialized developed economy. I think it's trying to embrace that truth. The solution for that, to borrow a quote from an Indian spiritual sort of leader of the past and a philosopher, that 99% of our problems usually lie inside. And, by and large, I would say this is more than 99% of the times true. So I think to try to fix what the rest of the world does. Imagine, I just want to pose this as a question to the global leaders. Is it easier for you to fix what you do in your own economy, or is it easier for you to fix what is being done by another economy? I think it's very clear that you have much greater control as the leader of a country on what you do yourself. Now, if you devote all that attention to fixing behavior of those who are outside, clearly the returns to that effort are going to be very, very minuscule, in my opinion. Yeah.
Awesome. Even though you're talking about finance and everything, you break it down in such simple language and express it so beautifully that, you're almost sending me into a somewhat meditative state. I feel myself becoming calmer and everything. Do you have a little bit of a guru gene in you think?
No, I have nothing of the sort. I think it is very important that one speaks what one believes in, at least hopefully, at least some of the times that is true and accurate. No, I think that it's good to get down to things from first principles. I think when you do that, you realize that most of the problems are not as complex as they seem. And very often, what you also realize is that the obfuscation about the truth that one sees in what is being talked about is very often because it's very conflicted. It is so easy, in a way, for the leadership to blame someone else, exactly the way the human tendency is to blame your shortages on problems elsewhere. So, but I think I want to come back to one of Mel's question because to just get back to this. My sense is it's going to be hard for the global leadership to bury this truth for a long time. I think the fact that their own domestic responses have been inadequate, woefully inadequate in some cases, it's going to be hard for them to bury this truth. It's going to unravel now, whether it happens in the next 4 years, whether it happens in the next 10 years, that remains to be seen. And I have no doubt that once the truth comes out, and it will be embraced because people will be able to see that sometimes we may have chosen a particular leadership because it was saying what we wanted to hear. But in the end, they didn't really go to the root cause of what we need and why that's happening. I think a new set of leaders will emerge once the truth is a little bit more out in the open, more stark. I think the new leaders will have to embrace it, and I have to say I'm keenly looking forward to that moment happening sooner rather than later.
Wonderful. All right. So this is around the time 10:40. We have another 20 minutes only. It's been like really fast the way that things have gone in terms of time, which means that you're spending time being really engaged. I want to turn over to Mel to see if she, Elena, to see if she has any questions. So I'm going to bring her up to begin with. And there we go. I think everybody can see Elena there from Peru. We can't hear you though, Elena. Can you hear us?
Hear you.
Okay, now I can.
Me? Can you hear me?
Hi, Elena. Yeah. Very nice to see you.
Yeah. Hello, nice having you here. Nice being part of the discussion. Very interesting conversations. Thank you so much for your opinions and 3 points on each question. We actually have some questions that also ask your 3 points on some ideas here. For example, we have a question about short and mid impact, short-term and mid-term impact on businesses. So could you give some kind of advice or 3 things that businesses should do to position themselves in order to thrive and move forward?
Absolutely. I think it's a very important question for economics as well as those who are running their businesses, and I would say even for a large number of people who are self-employed and running smaller firms. I think this is very important. First and foremost, I would say that liquidity in the short run is going to be very crucial. Being able to manage your immediate expenditures, keeping your payroll in place, being able to withstand higher costs of finance from your banks, or if you're larger firms, in terms of your market financing will be very crucial. I've done some research that is already suggesting that those who had prearranged buffers of liquidity to deal with the shock are being rewarded in the markets compared to those who are now scrambling. So I would say, first and foremost, you have to tide over your immediate cash flow problems, and prudent management of liquidity is going to be absolutely crucial. Second, I would say, however, coming back to my point that until a vaccine is found and delivered in large quantities, the background risk or the uncertainty is likely to remain with firms. It's likely to affect human behavior, consumption, and demand for some time. It would be wise to think about businesses as to what are their long-term survival plans. If you are in a business that's benefiting from the pandemic, maybe you're in the pharma sector or in the tech sector, then of course you may not have to worry about this. But for all others, some reorientation of business plans may be necessary. Which are your most efficient lines of business? In which ways can you make your processes to be most optimized and efficient? Where is the demand likely to remain robust over the next 1 or 2 years if the uncertainty continues for that long? And so some reorientation of business plans for longer term survival is going to be essential. What I'm trying to say is that liquidity in the short run, but thinking hard about your solvency and survival in the long run should both take precedence at the present moment. And third, I come back to my theme, which is that I hope that businesses realize now that we are living in a very heavily interconnected world. I think the focus of businesses has been on ruthless efficiency, if I could use that term. They are all pushing for just-in-time inventories, very complex supply chains where even a small breakage in the supply chain can actually create a havoc for, they always say it's the weakest link that determines the strength of the overall chain. I have a feeling that businesses, whether we like it or not, will be forced to think about some robustness and resilience as their operating criterion, rather than just ruthless efficiency of quarter by quarter profits, quarter by quarter earnings that you report to your shareholders or to yourself if you are a self-employed person. I think they will think about resilience. How can I withstand a large tsunami, a large hurricane, a large pandemic, a large climate change shock that might come down the line? Am I prepared to deal with that rather than just deliver quarter by quarter performance? I would say these are three themes that I would like to mention.
Wonderful, beautiful. If you don't mind, Elena, I'm going to kind of usurp your power and ask a question that I really love here from Ashish Mishra, which is that you said globalization had all these positive effects, Viral, and that we are kind of biting the hand that fed us at some level by going isolationist. But isn't it also true that the globalization and the hyperconsumption that it triggered was a big cause for the climate change, which in a way might be the cause you're saying as the new hypothesis? So isn't there a little bit of an internal contradiction there?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I'm fully supportive of the view that a large amount of consumption that we undertake is supported through production processes which are contributing significantly to climate change issues. Clearly, I think my sense is, if the numbers are right, between 2 to 3% of the carbon emissions are attributed to just the burning of the jet fuel because of the travel that gets undertaken for cargo, passenger travel, and so on. But no, in the sense that I don't think the right answer to that is to say either that we should consume less or that we should only consume locally. I think the right answer is to identify how to design the processes so that we are not producing levels of emissions or damage to the climate that is beyond what one may think preserves the planet to be sustainable for the youth and the future generation. So I don't have a silver bullet on how to solve this problem. There are many who have proposed clever solutions to the carbon emissions problem. The standard solution in economics is what is called as Pigouvian taxation, which is you try to measure who's contributing how much to the emissions, and then you design a tax of some form, like a pollution tax that's based on that. It's easier said than done. But I think some version of that is necessary. So you have incentives to actually do the right process decisions. I don't think, because we can reduce consumption and at the same time have much worse climate change practices in our production. Because if consumption is less, businesses may actually experience loss of profits, and they may abandon even the caution they are exercising right now to the winds, and start actually going down a path of minimizing their costs of production at every available opportunity. So I do think the right solution is to focus global attention on climate change as being an important stress that we have to have robustness, resilience against, and come up with some reasonable business practices, getting them to internalize the fact that there are spillovers. And it's one of these things where clearly each business collectively is worse off if the frequency of zoonotic diseases, if the frequency of climate shocks is going to increase from being very low frequency to being almost like a natural business cycle recession. Every business is collectively worse off. But of course, individually, you are in a competitive world, and they will go for ruthless efficiency left to their own devices. So I think some balancing through global public policy is necessary in my view.
Okay. Would you, if there were a position like president of the world, would you be willing to run for it?
Oh, absolutely not. Being able to speak the truth is almost like
Disqualified.
if you can do that, it's a prerequisite to not apply for that job.
And the fact that you said no qualifies you.
All right, Elena, we have about 10 minutes, 11 minutes left, and over back to you. Sorry for taking over from you.
Oh, the time was a great question. So there's another question there's one more question from Abhishek, and he says, would the opening up of the factories, malls, and shops be possible in the way it was before the COVID-19, and unless the vaccine is found? And if not, then we're definitely going to lose many jobs.
I think here I'll give a simple answer. I think no. Until the vaccine is found, most countries are likely to adopt some social distancing norms even as they open up. Because I think at the end of the day, the ethical question that the governments will have to answer is, can they really push the lives versus livelihood trade-off to a point where they say, we don't have a vaccine, there could be a second wave, and yet please go out and do whatever you want. We'll deal with the second wave of pandemic as and when it happens. I think having witnessed the first wave, it's going to be very hard for anyone to accept that as the policy. My sense is, and we don't have to, I think we can open up in a targeted manner. As I said, certain age groups are more vulnerable than others. There could be different levels of relaxations based on that. And if testing and tracing could be implemented, at least where the countries can afford and where the countries have actually a community health service delivery, they could do probably even more of that. But to believe that we can go back to life as normal very soon, until we have confidence that the second waves are not emerging in spite of the contact intensities of people rising, I would say it's not going to happen.
Right, and we also say that come winter there's going to be the regular flu season, right? Added on top of this, and so that's when the real test of this is going to be. We'll see, and I'm really kind of keeping fingers crossed, hoping that nothing majorly negative happens. Go ahead, Alina.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we hope for the best, but I think we are bound to be a bit cautious because I think it is a fog of uncertainty that we are living in until we know that a vaccine can at least take care of the immediate disease. I think the big question is, when we come out, even post-vaccine, are we likely to embrace climate change? Are we likely to embrace the occurrence of zoonotic diseases as being more frequent than what we thought they were? I think that's going to be a big question. I think I'm curious to hear myself what the medical profession and the epidemiologists have to say about this.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, we have people who are denying climate change to begin with, right? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Go ahead, Elena. I think you had a question on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, we have actually two questions that are very similar. So how do we make sure we don't go back to the same life that we had before the pandemic, but we really learn from this experience? And what are the three things that you can recommend for us to be a better person, for everybody to be a better person, and for us to be able to maybe leave some advice for our great-grandchildren?
I don't want to sound terribly paternalistic here. I think my sense is people will form their own lessons as to, I think world is complex. I think everyone's life is very different. I think different families are affected in very different ways. So I think everyone will draw their own lessons, but at a high level, if I could maybe just mention three lessons that I have learned, I don't know if these are relevant for everyone or not, would be one that I think I've realized that human beings depend on each other in far more unexpected ways than just our immediate spheres of influence. I hope that it broadens our horizon of thinking and decision making rather than sort of going more towards the isolationist view versus being pushed in some spheres. And I hope that we all realize that actually if we can make everyone else better off, sometimes it is actually even to our own advantage. I would say, even if you viewed that strategy as a selfish strategy, I think I would be very happy if that was the way to go. I would say the second thing is that it's good to keep in mind that things can and will change unexpectedly and dramatically in future also. Just think about it. Every time I've experienced a large shock in the last 20 years, I've said, "Oh, I never thought this could happen." So there is not just that the risks can materialize, but I think it is the fact that the nature of the risk itself keeps changing, because as we evolve, so does the rest of the system. And I want to say it's not just other human beings, it's actually also nature, the planet, that's also evolving in its own ways, in an adaptive way to what the human response is to changing conditions. And I think that requires a slightly different way of our existence, our consumption decisions, our business decisions, our policy decisions at the national and the global level. And I think we have to factor this in, which is that there is something beyond just human beings on this planet. It's the planet itself. In fact, if I could say, my screensaver is this image that a student had sent me, which I just love. It's called Earthrise, which is a picture of the Earth rising as Apollo 13 saw it from the moon. And I use it because I want to remind myself that actually, one, that there is a world even outside this Earth. It may right now we may not have discovered life there, but that it's a very complex system, and the more inward looking and the more local we think, the more global will be the nature of the problems we face. And so I think it's better to have a global, I would say almost a universal horizon in our decision making in the first place. And third and last, I would just say that ultimately, though, each individual's impact in terms of the decisions they make is, of course, the highest on the people around you. So, do the best for your families, for your businesses, maybe to the immediate people you are interacting with who may be below the subsistence levels. As I mentioned, we all take help from others. I can tell you that even in the richest countries, many of them are not part of the social welfare programs. They are not covered with the paychecks that are going out from the government as support. And many of them are unfortunately not in the formal system. And if they're not in the formal system, the government is not able to actually support them directly. So there's a large number of people who are reliant on informal networks, and they are therefore reliant on their employers, their well-wishers, and those who are immediately next to them. So I would say global horizon, global focus, global understanding, but localized solutions at the end of the day.
Thank you. Hey, you guys, I have to go. I want to thank you so much.
Go?
I have to go. I have to prepare for something.
Okay. Is this because you want to leave 3 people on the screen because everything comes in threes?
Yes, that is why. But actually, I have done the thing where I have back-to-backs till 3 o'clock, and then I have these 5 minutes in between to,
Mel, it was lovely seeing you.
Thank you so much, Mel, for your questions.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mel. Bye.
All right. We have just 3 minutes, as it turns out. And so John Zakur asked, have you read Rendezvous with Rama? Because everything comes in threes. It's a sci-fi. I haven't read it.
No, I haven't read it, but thank you for the recommendation. I'll definitely
read it.
If it comes in threes, I have to read it.
You have to read it, yeah. He's got an excellent sci-fi book himself that he authored called The Plutonium Blonde. It's really very funny and interesting and very well written. So I look forward to getting hold of it. Thank you. Okay, all right. Elena, back to you. Do you have any more questions that you want to pose?
Well, we have some these kind of very practical, interesting questions. When are we going to watch another movie in the cinema? When are we going to have cricket? When are we going to play cricket again? When is this going to happen?
We play cricket every weekend, by the way. If you guys want to come over to Austin.
No, I wish I could look through the crystal ball and give you the answers. I think my sense is we have to all innovate, improvise, and make the most of what we can. I think a great collection of movies is available through Netflix and Amazon Prime or whatever cable or Wi-Fi supplier you have. I think there's so much interesting content that we are developing online. And I think, as I mentioned in one of the queries to Raj earlier, in a way, to me, that is what is the hope. I think to me, that's the most positive sign, which is that a lot of technology and innovation that we worked on over the last 3 decades, a lot of it has really been of such immense use in coping with the isolation induced by the pandemic. Imagine if we didn't have these facilities, I think our levels of economic and emotional well-being will not be as high.
Absolutely. That's really interesting that, if this had to happen, it's coming at a good time in the sense that we seem equipped to handle it, for the most part, at least in terms of human connection, which is very, very important. Another thing that I was reminded of, Viral, when you were talking about the 3 things in response to the last question, the second thing that you mentioned is that this Earth rising thing and the system is complex and so on. I'm reminded of that quote by, I think, Einstein, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact wording, but he said that you cannot solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created the problem. Right? You're going to have to rise above it in order to be able to solve it. And I think that's very appropriate to this situation.
Yeah, I think, and I fully endorse that. I think, as I said, it's a sobering moment in many ways. I think even for academics, economists, and all, means this is a very sobering moment, so to speak, which is that, we did have these epidemics happen. There was SARS, there was MERS. In fact, I actually discovered a PhD dissertation in France of a student in 2014, which was explaining how an epidemic could become a global pandemic and trigger a global recession. I have to confess that most academics and economists were not thinking along these lines a bit further ahead. So I think there is a lot for us to learn immediately, as well as thinking about risks. I think I like this idea that the nature of risks itself actually keeps changing over time, and we have to realize this evolutionary nature of risks and the complex organic system we live in while focusing on our immediate chores on a day-to-day basis.
It's awesome. I'm noticing a comment by my good friend Mohammed Dohadwala. He says that I hope you're aware that your name is literally viral.
No, in fact, I was surprised that one of you did not address me as viral so far.
But this is going to go viral. That's what
let me just chip in with the last comment, which is, but I hope some of you know that my last name is means guru. Acharya is a guru, so I'm a viral guru.
Awesome. Okay, I think we're out of time, guys. It's 11:01 as usual. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is developing into a beautiful family kind of a get together every weekend. We're going to have somebody called Darren Roberts from the University of Texas at Austin joining us next time. He's not a kind of a straight up academician. He's affiliated with the University of Texas, but he is a coach, a football coach. Okay. Not for the University of Texas, but football coach. And he's played with a lot of big wigs and also coached a lot of really very, very good players. And so he'll have some very useful insights, I'm sure, to share with us. Okay. So with that, adios, everyone. Thank you so much. And have a great, great, great weekend. Thank you, Elena, for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elena. Thank you to all the participants. And I hope you all stay safe. And
thank you, Viraj. Thank you, Raj.
Bye-bye. All right, so I've stopped streaming, by the way.
Okay, great.
And thanks again, Viral. Okay, it was
my pleasure. Yeah, it was very, very smooth. Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, excellent. And like the format a lot. Yeah.
We didn't get to all the questions, obviously, but that was to be expected.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is what happens is the responses push you in a certain direction. So
you want to stay true to the.
No, and I think I thought the flow was very natural, so it was very nice.
Yeah, we've covered many questions. We had many, maybe 3 left or 4 maximum. So I tried to just, some of them had the same topic, so I tried to put them in one.
Yeah. I think the movie, the cricket. These are the burning problems in India.
Yeah.
Can I see my favorite actor or actress on the TV?
I was surprised there was no question about dating. When are people going to date again?
Oh, yeah, that's true. So everybody asks questions that is most relevant to
Are
them.
we still online? I think they said we might be still in stream actually.
No,
I think we are still streaming. Actually.
Okay, all right, very good. I'll just stop it.